want to thank in a particular way those who are coming to share their talents with us. I'm going to invite Brian Billion back forward to share a piece from Chopin, Chopin's Impromptu number 2, and it's going to be a beautiful way to kind of enter in with one of the great Polish musicians into this contemplation on the Polish nation and upon Poland's place as a defender of Europe and a defender of freedom and a defender of faith. I'll introduce Dr. Kemp in a moment, but please join me in welcoming Brian Billion for a more formal performance piece. Brian sings as a section leader in our Holy Cross Choir, and grateful that he's not only a wonderful singer, but he is an extraordinary pianist. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share this music. I'm not Polish personally, but I've always had a special place for this composer who's so inspiring to me throughout my whole life. Playing his music is such a gift. So I'm thankful to Poland for that. And of course, Chopin, one of the great Polish composers. This piece, the first piece that I'll play, and then the next piece I'll play later on. The first piece is an impromptu. So an impromptu is a type of improvisation. And so there's this kind of winding melody that kind of almost seems improvised. It's kind of meandering along, and it kind of manifests itself throughout the piece in different forms. And I like it's a very kind of spontaneous piece. He actually wasn't in Poland when he composed it. He was in, I believe, Spain, because he was very sick throughout his whole life with tuberculosis, and so he was trying to recuperate in the warm weather. So this piece also kind of, he was on the coastline, so it kind of reminds me of like some sort of water, or sort of almost like sunlight glinting off the water, or waves, or there's certain moments that are really evocative of that. So those are just some things to listen to, maybe the most importantly, just kind of this wonderful melody. So without further ado, I'll play the Chopin Impromptu number 2.
Bravo, bravo.
One
One of the things we really try to embody in our parish is this love of the arts and music in particular as part of this way of beauty that leads us to God, certainly as an expression of our faith and our tradition, but so grateful for the opportunity to bring these things together in juxtaposition. It's a great privilege for me to welcome one of my professors from my college days at St. Thomas here to Holy Cross. Through the years, I've certainly been grateful to be able to welcome various of my favorite professors. I don't think it's an over-exaggeration to say that Dr. Kemp is one of the most beloved professors of recent decades who's been around St. Thomas. He certainly is known as one of the most devout men, regularly at daily masses around the campus. And I, as a priest, certainly offered many masses at Sitzman Hall, the Center for Catholic Studies, and found him praying in his very particular way, along with everyone, but from the heart. He doesn't always match the rhythm of his prayers to everyone else's prayers, so I always know he's at Mass, but it's a great joy, Dr. Kemp, to have you here. I've never wondered once if you mean what you pray. I also know that you're a great scholar. I knew from some of my friends that you were never satisfied with the books that were available in English, so you found a Polish philosophy textbook that you translated and made your own textbook for one of your courses. I didn't have that particular course, but I've long known that you were a lover of all things Polish, and more recently we reconnected. Dr. Kemp has retired recently from the University of St. Thomas, where he taught for 30 years, and I guess he has a little more free time now to devote to all these wonderful projects. He was telling me at dinner that he's been reading the Aeneid again. He's also giving talks to various parishes. He's finding ways to stay busy. But I'm very grateful that we were able to sign him up for a 3-part lecture series, which begins tonight. The first topic really on this vision of a historical vision of the Polish national identity. We're going to be then continuing in November with a focus on the poets and literature of Poland. And then the third segment in January, still a forthcoming date, on the saints of Poland. This was really his thought of being able to celebrate in different profiles so much that needs to be celebrated. Hopefully, as we head into the talk, you have a copy of the handout, which has some reading lists. Certainly, his own reading list is much, much longer, and he's given us a few high points. And also, you'll see a translation that he made of the Slavic Pope that you'll be hearing about as well. But just join me in welcoming Dr. Kenneth Kemp, a great and bright light to these specific. Thank you.
Schwierig. Oder Schweiz. Ich.
Okay, so first topic that I want to talk about a few minutes is the concept of nation and then importance. Early in his epistle to the Galatians, St. Paul wrote, there is neither
To leave this house. Whatever's senior.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, so early in his epistle to the Galatians, St. Paul wrote that there is neither Greek nor Jew, for we are all one in Christ Jesus. Does that mean that Christianity requires a neglect or even a rejection of the national dimension of a person's identity? Surely not, since he also says in the passage we just quoted that there is neither male nor female. His remark was intended only to emphasize a certain kind of egalitarianism that, in the words of St. John Paul, every nation has the same right to a place in the new covenant. And so we can go on to ask what place a national identity should have in human life. Christian anthropology does not minimize the significance of nations. I mean in the anthropological, not in the legal or political sense. And in the conversations about conversations with Polish philosophers, Józef Cistern and Krzysztof Tucholsky, who were later published as Memory and Identity, John Paul emphasized that the nation and native land, like the family, are realities that cannot be replaced. They have a particular connection to human nature. Both are natural communities. The Slavic lexicon emphasizes that connection. The Polish words "dzina" and "naród" have the same root. But what is a nation? John Paul characterized it in two ways. First, is a great community of men united by various ties, but above all precisely by culture. Second, is a community which distinguishes itself from others precisely by its own culture. The capacity for culture unifies mankind as a species, insofar as it's what enables us to be fully human, what differentiates us from animals. That unity of culture coexists with and is compatible with a plurality of cultures, just as a common and uniquely human capacity for language does with the multiplicity of distinct human languages. Every nation lives by the works of its own culture, John Paul wrote. And in the address to UNESCO, he added, I am the son of a nation which lived through great historical trials, one whose neighbors condemned at many times to death, but which survived and which remained itself. It preserved its identity and preserved, despite traditions of foreign occupations, its national sovereignty, not by relying on physical force, but solely by relying on its culture. Under the circumstances, this culture proved to be more powerful than any other force. This series of lectures will constitute an introduction to one of the many nations of the world. Why should you be interested? First, an answer for those of you with Polish ancestry. John Paul thought highly of patriotism, which he defined as a love for everything to do with our country, its history, its traditions, its language, its landscape. It's a love which extends also to the works of our compatriots and the fruits of their genius. That's John Paul, not me. This, he goes on to say, is an aspect of pietas mandated by the Fourth Commandment. I believe that in Latin, I might put it in English, piety, but piety is in English to have such a narrow focus on religion. Pietas is broader than that, and so it includes all, not just of God, but of family, both our country and so on. So he says that patriotism is an aspect of this broader concept of pietas mandated by the Fourth Commandment. The most direct, the most proper object of the sentiment of patriotism is, at least presumptively, the country in which we were raised, or more properly, the country in which raised us. The virtue of pietas, however, encompasses more than that. The popular idea that we do not know who we are unless we know who our biological ancestors were seems to me to be mistaken. Nevertheless, the virtue of pietas does seem to invite some attempt to know who they were. Names, dates, and birthplaces are nice, of course, as we go through in our genealogical charts, but beyond that, and more important, lies an appreciation of the culture that formed them and in which they lived. It's fine for Polish Americans to begin by knowing what bigos are, so thanks to the Kunstwerk, or even by eating them, and so to smile with appreciative understanding. When they read what enemies Janitro and Pantarelos, that when bigos is being cooked, no words can tell the wonder of its color, taste, and smell. And if they do not in themselves attack the stew with a thrice repeated yell that they read about in his poem, at least they would not with the 18th century husband. It would be appropriate for them to do so. So, pietas should lead beyond Polish cuisine to a deeper familiarity with Mickiewicz work, with the Polish army and what stands to Kenneth. Good. An introduction to Polish culture offers, however, a good intellectual return on investment to everyone, regardless of ancestry. In general, the study of any foreign culture, Uzbek, say, or Nepali, different its language and at least its history, literature, religions, and religious expression, offers such a return. It prompts our understanding of variations on the theme of human being. Polish Catholicism's place as, to quote political cyclist Bogdan Tchaikovsky, the embodiment of Polish cultural values and traditions, and the Church's role as the guardian of the nation's language, history, traditions, and culture, makes a study of Polish history and culture particularly, even if not uniquely appropriate for Catholics. I can use as a kind of overall illustration for my lectures a painting that Jan Henrik de Rosen did for the Vatican International Catholic Press Fair in 1936. Colonia, which in Latin, of course, doesn't just mean you who are here in the United States, but it just means Poland. Sanctorum Mater Scutum Christianitatis, Poland, Mother of Saints and Shield of Christianity. And this, the first of my 3 lectures, will address one theme from Polish history, the one illustrated on the painting's right. This, and the second, will take up one component of Polish literature, and Rosen does place a, well, non-canonized, but neverthelessly poet Jan Kozłowski among his saints. The third will take up Polish religion. By looking at the lives of some Poles who in various ways have exemplified Christian virtues in the Polish context, and veneration of whom has subsequently been a feature of Polish piety. And that's the thing on the left side of the painting, writing up, say, Trzaskowski. Well, look at it, the painting they kept the lectures. So, I want to move on to the concept of themes in national history. What do I mean by a theme in the nation's history? I move away from the idea that history is just one darn thing after another, but without moving as far as the idea that history is exactly the kind of iron law pattern proposed, for example, in an autonomous study of history. Examples of such themes in American history would be the gradual realization of the full significance of the idea that all men are created equal, and the recognition of the idea that a national identity can be based not on common ancestry, but on common ideals. And so, for the history of Poland, themes might include many. The list comes from George Guston Williams, attempt to introduce John Paul to American readers at the beginning of his pontificate. So he lists a close bond between church and nation, tolerance and the defense of liberties, cohabitation in the same country, Roman Catholic, Greek Catholic, and Orthodox, and Polish Messianism. The theme I want to address does not, however, quite any of those, but the commonality among 4 important events in Polish history, a commonality that does not depend on any grand philosophy or theology of history, but one drawing together the fact that 4 times in the last 350 years, Poland has made a singular contribution to the protection or liberation of European Christendom, 3 times by military action and the 4th by nonviolent means. Poland is not the only nation to have made such a contribution. The French did it with their defeat of Arab armies at the Battle of Tours in 732. And the 7th of Edward, Sir Edward Creasy's 15 decisive battles of history. 1,200 years later, Americans did it in World War II. Poland, I want to suggest, did this on 4 distinct occasions, and those occasions can be pulled together as constituting a theme in the nation's history. A survey of the major battles of Polish military history calls to mind a number of battles, victories and defeats that were up there what? Resistance to foreign invaders. So, Władysław Jagiello's defeat of the Knights of the Teutonic Order at Grunwald. They can read about it in Sienkiewicz or fictional adaptation of this Knights of the Teutonic Order. Here's a painting of Jan Matejko of the Battle of Grunwald. So, second, Prior Augustine Kordecki's resistance to the Swedish-German siege of the monastery of Jasna Góra in Częstochowa in 1655. Sienkiewicz dealt with it in the deluge. Here's another painting of it in this by Rosen. If you look at a minute ago, we'll get back to this painting. I'm not having one later. And third, Tadeusz Kościuszko's resistance to Russian aggression at the Battle of Wrocławice. They can find any similar model to recommend. There's Matejko's painting again. Matejko will talk about it again. Anyway, all of these battles, justified though they were, had a fundamentally national significance. 2 other battles, together with contributions to a much larger war, and finally a violent revolution, had a significance for all of Europe. My theme then is captured in the model formulated apparently by Joachim Bolewo, the great Polish historian, in the first half of the 19th century, for our freedom and yours. My theme is similar to the idea of Poland's anti-morale or scutum Christianitatis as a bulwark or shield of Christianity. An idea that had been applied to Poland and sometimes to other frontline states as well, at least since the 15th century. But because my theme is concerned with intra-European as well as external threats, it's not quite the same. It's also distinguishable from, perhaps even to some extent, opposite of Polish messianism, which Williams characterized as the interpretation of the suffering of the nation in terms of, as a Poland, in terms of Christ's passion and resurrection. And George Weigel characterized it as the idea that redemptive suffering was Poland's national destiny. Partitioned Poland being a Messiah among nations, a suffering servant whose time on Calvary would redeem the world. And so it hath been Western materialism into a more spiritual form of freedom. Whether that idea is theologically orthodox or irredeemably problematic has been a matter of some controversy in Europe. I won't know how to discuss it. Tonight, you might tell me in the questions or something, but I don't know deep thoughts about it. I want to think about something else. So, I think the siege of Vienna in 1683, that's the first of the four cases that I said we're going to get topic. So I want to begin my first story, though, not on the Vistula or on the Danube, but on the Tiber, on the Vatican museums. Deep in that museum, between the Gallery of Maps and the apartment of Julius II, lies the Sala Sobieski. However much visitors to the museum might have come primarily to see the Sistine Chapel or the studs at Raffaello, it's hard for them completely to overlook Jan Matejko's Jan Sobieski, vanquisher of the Turks at the gates of Vienna, a painting that measures almost 9 meters in width and 4.5 in height. And they should not overlook it. Encyclopedia Britannica once listed it, along with 3 works of Michelangelo and 2 of Raffaello, as one of the 7 paintings one should not miss in the Vatican City. But who is Jan Matejko? And why is this picture hanging where it is? 19th century artist Jan Matejko was Czech and German by ancestry, but Polish by upbringing. Matejko was explicit in his rejection of the idea, according to the France of his day, that art was for the sake of art. His own view, living in the Austrian share of partitioned Poland, was that art is now a kind of weapon for us. Separating it from the love of country is not allowed. He used it to express, among other things, the religious foundations of Polish culture and the multi-ethnic nature of the Commonwealth. Matejko's vision of Polish history and Polish historical figures, wrote Thomas Prema, for good or for real, are grounded in the consciousnness of almost all modern Poles. In order to answer, in order to answer the second question, why the picture's here, we need to begin with the subject of the painting and ask 2 sub-questions. First, what were the Turks doing at the gates of Vienna? And second, what was Jan Sobieski, King of Poland, doing there? The Turks would be their first contact with Christendom on the far side of Anatolia in the 11th century. And by the middle of the 14th, made their appearance in Europe. Then in the middle of the 15th, they took Constantinople. In the 16th, they reached the northern edge of the Balkans, Suleiman the Magnificent having captured Belgrade in 1521 and defeated the Hungarians at Mohacs in 1526, before laying siege to Vienna in 1529. That first siege failed, but a century and a half later, there was a second. The last days of March, 1683, saw the departure of an Ottoman Empire northbound out of Belgrade. The Sultan's objective had given only the fortification in Győr, just south of the Danube, between Budapest and Győr. But the commander, Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, decided instead to lay siege to Vienna itself. Meanwhile, on the throne of Poland sat Jan Sobieski, born into an aristocratic family in 1629. In 1674, after many years in military service, culminating in a spectacular victory over the Turks at the Battle of Kochen the previous year, he was elected king. In 1683, almost to the day the Turkish army left Belgrade, he signed a mutual defense treaty with Austria. To be sure, Sobieski had personal reasons for war against the Turks, as well as security reasons for coming to the aid of the Austrians. His grandfather and a great uncle had died at the Battle of Tsushima in 1620. The grandfather's head had been sent as a trophy to Istanbul. Another uncle, and later Jan's brother, had been murdered by the Tatars as prisoners of war. A memorial stone in the chapel at his family seat was inscribed with a line from the Aeneid, letter to Benzer Oranites from these bones. On the 14th of July, a Turkish army of 140,000 men strong had reached the walls of Vienna. It quickly encircled the city, largely cutting off the garrison's communication with the Austrian army still in the field. Count Mustafa threatened death to the defenders and destruction in the city if it did not surrender immediately. Nevertheless, the city refused to do so. On the 15th of August, Sobieski set out from Kraków with an army of 25,000 men, and by early September it joined the imperial forces under Charles Louvain, as well as the smaller Bavarian, Saxon, and Franconian armies, to create a relief expedition of some 75,000. On the 12th of September 1683, as the city's suffering from dysentery and shortage of food became increasingly desperate, they succeeded in driving Kara Mustafa's army into headlong retreat. Every nation likes to make sure that its own contributions to world history are noted, and so German historians sometimes emphasize the contributions of William von Starnberg inside the city and Charles Louvain without in the lifting of the siege. Notable audophiles should minimize the contributions of those men to the salvation of their own city. Nevertheless, three facts allow Poles to make a legitimate claim to the preeminence of Jan Sobieski in the battle. First, he was called in from abroad to lift the siege of the Habsburg capital. Second, he was overall commander-in-chief of the Allied forces. And third, he personally commanded the charge of the Polish Hussars, which crossed the Ottoman left flank and decided battle with favorite the Christian line. This painting, by the way, is by Alexander Oleshko. Those of you who read Plantaneous very carefully will notice that someplace in book 3 or 4, he's mentioned it in Kasse. When you reread it, you can watch for here and say, I know the painting. Anyway, Sobieski declared Lion of Liechtenstein on one side, thus had reason to be called the savior of Vienna and of Western European civilization by the other. He recognized the religious cultural aspect to his campaigns. His message, Pope Innocent XI, whose concerns about Turkish conquests in Europe that led some to calling the last crusading Pope, read, Venimus vidibus Deus vincit. I saw God conquered. That must be the British having that envoy there on to a small tool. But I'm sure that's what it says. Okay. Shortly after the defeat, the Sultan, who had never been enthusiastic about the venture, sent some of his agents to Karl Mustafa's headquarters. Finding him at prayer, they waited until he had finished and strangled him. The German title underneath says, "Is the work, so the wages." The policy Sobieski pursued in the years after 1683 did not work out well for Poland. Nevertheless, as Norman Davies wrote, historical judgments have been lenient. The memory of Sobieski's victories gradually effaced all recollection of his political failures. In the dark decades of defeat and national humiliation of the 19th and 20th centuries, all Poles have looked with pride to a Polish king whose deeds reverberated to their credit throughout Europe. Those days. Sobieski's palette, Milano, in Warsaw still stands as one of Poland's outstanding examples of Baroque architecture. Matejko painted Sobieski in 1881 to 83. He had an exhibit in Vienna at the celebration of the second centenary of the lifting of the siege, and then sent it on to the Vatican, where Pope Leo XIII presided at its reception. Why did Matejko not bring it back to Poland as many Poles had hoped that he would? As he was showing it to the emperor, his secretary explained that it was being sent as a votive offering, giving the serious illness of Matejko's wife. Prinlock added, at the same time, it should also be noticed that in recognizing Matejko's work so openly, Franz Joseph and the Pope alone in all of Europe had pledged some faith in the Polish people in a way, and in a way recognized the existence of Poland. So, my next case, well, Warsaw, 1920, the Fab Congress told. About the first he emphasized the importance of his topic by pointing out that the relief of Vienna was a feat not to be executed by Poland until the Battle of Warsaw in 1920. So, but next move will then line and forward with another threat of Christendom, this time not from Muslim Turkey, but from Bolshevik Russia. The Bolshevik coup against Russia's struggling democratic government in October 1917, or November by the new calendar, set off both the inter-Russian Civil War and the assertion by many non-Russian peoples of their independence from Moscow. Soviet Russia set its sights on world revolution, and so communist Poland would be partly ended in South and partly bridged to the support of communist revolutions in the rest of Europe. What brings us under our theme is Marxism's philosophical anti-Christianity. Religion, Marx had said, was okay to the people. He went on to say that the abolition of religion is the illusory happiness of the people as a demand for the true happiness, and communism was ruthless in its attempt to implement that abolition, a topic that I'll return to at the end of this lecture, and then again briefly in the lecture 3. The topic now is Poland's role in resisting the early spread of communism. The first years of a Russo-Polish war, there's images from each side, saw the advance of Polish armies. By April 1920, they reached Kiev, but then the tide of war changed. You can see large there's kids. See it, and by December, by June, and then we've studied August, for those of you who's Portuguese, is Aristides. So that is just best map I could find. Something's anyway, the Polish army began a retreat, averaging 10 kilometers a day, and lasted for 6 weeks. By August 1920, the Red Army had advanced almost to Warsaw. Józef Pilsudski, who had played a major role in the establishment of an independent government in Warsaw in 1918 as German troops withdrew, and had been made Marshal of Poland early in 1920, ordered to counterattack in mid-August. The battle ran from the 12th to the 18th of August, but is sometimes conventionally and symbolically taken on the 15th. He succeeded in stopping the rain advance. Davies summarized the outcome of Tukhachevsky's 5 armies, which set out for the west on the 4th of July. One had ceased to exist, 2 were decimated, 2 were severely mutilated. Within a fortnight of the first day of the battle, the Red Army's retreat had become a rout. It was the only unredeemed defeat of the Red Army that the Red Army suffered until Afghanistan. The borders of interwar Central Republic Poland were set at the Treaty of Riga the next year. Poles have come to call this the miracle on the Vistula. Some historians claim that the phrase was originated by Pilsudski's political opponents in order to deny him credit for the victory. For many Poles, however, it's associated not just with the amazing turn of events, but with widespread reports that Our Lady herself was seen on the battlefield. Pilsudski had not only ordered, but had been present to counterattack the turn of the tide on those fateful days. For this, although not exclusively for this, he has a prominent place in Poland's memorialization of its history. Mikhail Tukhachevsky, the Red Napoleon who had lost the battle, survived longer than Karl Mustafa Pasha had, but Stalin had him shot as part of a one general purge in the ring on the 1937. Although Poland deserves the bulk of the credit for defending not just itself, but Europe from a Bolshevik invasion and supporting Europe-wide communist revolutions, perhaps we can also acknowledge two small but trivial American contributions to bulwark Poland. The first was the work of Herbert Hoover's American Relief Administration. You can see we were on that one side. Killing Rocky, that comes to Alexandria will be a factor. So look at it too, and attention to it. Anyway, first was the work of Herbert Hoover's American Relief Administration, which arranged massive shipments of food and clothing to newly independent, hungry, and ill-clad Poland. By 1922, that American Relief Administration had served 500 million meals. Hoover himself visited Poland in August 1919. There's a square named after him in downtown Warsaw. The second was the formation in 1920 of the Polish Air Force's 7th Air Escadrille, the Kosciuszko Squadron, by Marion Cooper and other American volunteers. According to family tradition, an ancestor of Cooper had fought under Kosciuszko Pulaski in the siege of Savannah during the American Revolution, and Cooper wanted to return the favor. Cooper is, however, perhaps better known for his role in saving not Lviv from Simeon Buccioni's Red Cavalry, but New York. What? It's the difficult call. He made the movie and gave himself the role of pilot for the Mr. the coming across. But we're supposed to be doing more serious things. The historical significance of the Battle of Warsaw should not be overlooked. The Viscount d'Auvergne, who was then in Poland as special envoy of the British government, called it the 18th decisive battle of the world, building on Crecy's work I mentioned earlier. Davies wrote, unlike all other post-war squabbles with which is frequently equated, the Polish-Soviet War raised wider issues, the clash of ideologies, the export of revolution, and the future of Europe itself. The perceived religious significance of the battle is illustrated not only by the presence of an image of Our Lady in Jerzy Kosak's Miracle on the Vistula, but by the existence and location of another painting. In 1919, Pope Benedict XV and Senator Kelly Rotten, that I showed you earlier, then head of the Vatican Library, as his diplomatic representative to the re-emerged Republic of Poland. As the Bolsheviks drew near to Warsaw, Rotten was almost the only member of the diplomatic corps to remain in the city. In 1929, Rotten, by then Pope Pius XI, commissioned Rosen, was standing, let's open up, to paint 2 frescoes for the papal chapel at Castel Gandolfo. One of those paintings depicts the defense of Czestochowa, that I showed you briefly earlier. The other, the Miracle on the Vistula. The figure at the center of Rosen's painting is Father Ignacy Skorupka, chaplain of the 236th Volunteer Infantry Regiment of the Economic Legion, who died on the 14th of August in the sub-battle of Oslo. Some reports say he died while giving last rites to a dying soldier, but Rosen here followed the account found in a communique from the General Staff, which emphasized the chaplain's heroic death as he led the attacking troops wearing the stool and with the cross in its hand. We could maybe discuss later whether this was the right thing or there's even another account of the story. Maybe this was easier to paint in the graphic fashion. Anyway, Pius XII, who was nuncio to Bavaria and faced communist threats to his life during the short-lived Bavarian Soviet Republic in 1998, was probably sympathetic to the theme of the frescoes. St. Paul VI was not and had them covered over, perhaps because they seemed too militaristic. They remained covered until restored to view by St. John Paul. Certain his Polish contributions to his fortune. A third story I want to begin in Lublin, the Polish city where I spent most of my time in the country. I'll again begin, if not with a work of art, at least with a monument. Whenever I travel, I make a special effort to notice monuments, and even mere plaques on the walls and buildings. And so, on Platz Litewski, in the middle of Lublin, I stopped to look at the memorial to the unknown soldier, then located in one corner of the square. The memorial was inscribed with the names of some 25 battles in which Polish soldiers had died. The focus was on World War II, running from what Winston Churchill called the audacious Polish counterattack at Kudno in 1939 to the breaching of the Pomeranian Wall and the final capture of Berlin in 1945. But it also included Narvik, Tobruk, and Monte Cassino. Tobruk? You've been in North Africa? How could Polish soldiers have died there? Well, it's easy, perhaps too easy, to imagine that Poland's participation in World War II began with the German attack on Westerplatte and the Free City of Gdansk at the beginning of September 1939. And then a few weeks after the follow-up Soviet attack on the 17th of September, with General Franciszek Slayback's surrender of the last Polish army in the field, on the 6th of October with the Battle of Quds. But unlike France, Poland itself never surrendered. There's hardly time to go on to mention the many Polish contributions to the Allied cause, ranging from Polish mathematicians cracking the German Enigma code to the Home Army sending to England in 1944 key parts of the German V-2 rocket. So I'll just do a quick survey following the levels motto, country by country. For our freedom, the emergent underground Polish Home Army, the Army in Toyola, continued the war at home. Many Poles who found themselves in the Soviet Union had no better choice than to join what ultimately became the Polish People's Army, which under Soviet command fought on the Eastern Front. And for yours? For France's. Marcel Duchamps' isolationist motto, "Why die for God's sake," which, to be fair, was never clearly the dominant French view, received a decisive review because Polish forces first contributed to the defense of France in 1940, and that played a role in its liberation in 1944. The first contribution came as Polish soldiers who had been able to make their way into and then out of Hungary and Romania after the collapse of the defense of Poland in 1939, made their way to France, and when the German invasion came in May 1940, contributed to its defense. When France fell, some Polish soldiers made their way to England, where they formed the Polish Volkswagen divisions. The second contribution began on the 30th of July 1944, when that division was sent to France and played a crucial role in closing the Falaise pocket. In August 1944, capturing more than 50,000 German soldiers. For Great Britain's, although most of Poland's aircraft were destroyed during the German attack in 1939, many of its airmen escaped to Britain. They early formed the Royal Air Force 302nd and 303rd Squadrons. The latter chose to be called the Kosciuszko Squadron, making it coincidentally an RAF unit named after someone who fought against England in the American Revolution. Although it was able to join the Battle of Britain only 2 months after the battle had begun, it shot down more German aircraft than any other squadron in that crucial battle. For Italy's. The Polish Second Corps, Hunger's army, formed by Polish citizens in the Soviet Union between the summer of 1941 and April 1942, eventually made its way to Italy, to the roundabout way through Tashkent, through Tehran, through Baghdad, and so on. But they made their way to Italy, eventually, as you can see at the end of the trail. And they did it as the Allied armies worked their way north up the peninsula. Key to breaking through the Gustav line on the road to Rome was the capture of St. Benedict's Old Abbey and Monte Cassino. 3 attempts. The first, incidentally, by Minnesota's 34th Infantry, the Red Bull Division, had failed before the task was assigned to Hunter's army, which succeeded in capturing what remained of the Abbey. Also noteworthy was their capture of the key supply port and Conan liberation of Bologna. And for Belgium's in command was the first Army Division also contributed to that liberation of the Ballet countries. Poland's Independent Parachute Brigade dumped in Operation Arctic Garden, the largest airborne operation of the war. So, fourth case, Revolution 1989. The Allied victory in World War II, to which Poland contributed so much, was, to be sure, the best of victory for Poland only in a qualified sense. Speaking of the Red Army's defeat on the Vistula in 1920 did not go entirely unredeemed. I might argue that it was redeemed by Soviet diplomats at Tehran, at Yalta, and at Potsdam, where Moscow laid the foundations for its capture of 10 formerly independent Central European nations, all of which remained communist, and most of whose governments were domestic, more or less puppets. Some of the puppets continued to control for nearly half a century. Our period attempts self-liberation, Germany in 1953, Poland and Hungary in 1956, Czechoslovakia in 1968 all failed. The Soviet victory did not, however, last forever. Let's conclude with a story that also begins in Midland but quickly found its center rather in Gdańsk, a story that, like the others, could also be subsumed under the levels motto, but that for the most part, except in Romania, did not involve dying or killing. Very much credit for the revolution in 1989 must also be given the music professor Vytautas Landsbergis in Lithuania and the playwright Václav Havel in Czechoslovakia. A certain primacy of honor is surely due to two poems. Davies had written in 1979, he was writing about the central figure of case number 2, that there is no other figure in the recent history of Poland to whom Józef Pilsudski can be compared. But by the time the work was published, 3 years later, two candidates for care of comparison had emerged, Tom and electrician Lech Robertson. Let's start with Wojtyła. In 1848, with the assassination of Count Pellegrino Rossi, Prime Minister of the Papal States led Pope Pius IX to flee the city. Polish Goik Julius Blavatsky wrote, Mrs. Sinner hand out together with a Polish original. Amidst the turmoil, God's bell rings. The great bell sounds its tone. From Slavic lands, a priest God brings to place upon the papal throne. That pope will not flee from danger, this Italian just has split his trust, but bravely he'll face sword of danger. For him, this world is only dust. Two previous Polish churchmen had in fact been considered but Słowatsky's poem did not receive much notice until 1978, when the Archbishop of Krakow was sent to the papal throne. Can we contrast St. John Paul with Blessed Pius IX? Perhaps more useful would be to contrast his policies with the conciliationist politique of St. John XXIII and St. Paul VI in the 1960s and 70s. That policy had been based on the presumption of the relative permanence of the Soviet hegemony and the international law, which ensured communist parties a leading role within each satellite nation. Vatican policy was to work at the state-to-state level, which circumvented local churches. The Ostpolitik had mixed results, although one of the five hierarch confessors of Central Europe, Blessed Aloysius, a pianist of Croatia, died while still under house arrest. The three, Josef of Velan of Czechoslovakia, Mincendi of Hungary, and Slippy in the Soviet Union, were able to go from detention and exile. On the other hand, while the fifth of those hierarchs, Blessed Stefan Nishinsky, was by 1958 already out of detention and continuing his fight for the church, the Polish government placed a copy of Częstochowa's icon, the Black Madonna, in your house arrest to keep it from completing its tour of Polish cities, and denied St. Paul VI the visa, despite the Polish churches having invited him to come to the celebration of the millennium of Polish Christianity in 1966. And Czechoslovakia sees it had to remain vacant for years. St. John Paul decided that a sterner approach was necessary. The challenge posed by life under communism was well illustrated by an apocryphal story set in Moscow at the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in February 1956. So here's the story. But as I think it's apocryphal. I have doubts as whether to get the message or, well, sorry, I'm staying my minutes. In the middle of Party Secretary Nikita Khrushchev's de-Stalinization speech, as Khrushchev worked his way through his list of Stalin's crimes, a voice called out, "And where were you, Comrade Khrushchev, when all of these crimes were being committed?" Khrushchev stopped me. Party Secretary in Ukraine. Khrushchev stopped and he glared at the audience. "Who said that?" No one answered. "Who said that?" Khrushchev demanded again. No one dared even to move. "Well, comrades," Khrushchev said, "that's where I was." The story, again, dubious veracity, tells us nothing about Khrushchev, but it does tell us something about life under communism, not just under Stalin, but even in the milder days of the 60s and 70s. For it was precisely in those 70s, 2 decades after de-Stalinization, the Czech playwright Václav Havel wrote, A manager of a fruit and vegetable shop places in his window, among the onions and carrots, a slogan, "Workers of the world unite." But it does not show that the greengrocer thinks that. Why didn't they do it? If you were to refuse, there could be trouble. What the slogan shows them is rather this thought: I am afraid, and therefore unquestioningly obedient. These stories give us some background for the words St. John Paul spoke first during the homily of his installation mass on the 22nd of October 1978, and then repeated throughout his pontificate. Be not afraid. It was a model by which Karl Wojtyła had lived, had to live from his first days as a priest. Every priest in communist Poland to some extent lived a life of danger. The new government had waged war against the church with varying degrees of intensity from 1944 to 1979, suppressing its press and appearing ecclesiastical appointments and confiscating its properties. The year 1953 began with a show trial of some members of the Krakow Curia accused of espionage and related any government activity. The court meted out death sentences to 2 priests as well as a life sentence to 1 boy. I'm not to exaggerate, I must add that all those sentences were later commuted. Still, September saw the arrest of Kardovashinsky. By the end of the year, 8 bishops and 900 priests were in prison. The Wojtyła lived by the motto as Archbishop of Krakow was particularly evident in his successful effort to build a church in Krakow's new district of Nowa Huta in 1977. In the face of communist insistence in Poland that a model communist town does not need a church. His ascent to the throne of Peter, however, demanded more of the virtues of shrewdness and perseverance than the bravery that had been required of him, especially in his first years as a priest in communist Poland. Those former were the virtues which the defense of Europe required, and those are the ones which he exercised. In the opening chapter of the final revolution, George Weichel does not deny the relevance of other causes of the revolution of 1989. The standard account, Gorbachev, the realist account, Reagan, the diplomatic account, Helsinki von Lack, the great ideas account, some history. The thesis of Weichel's book, however, is the idea that it's impossible to understand both the why of the revolution, the fact that in 1989, at this discrete point in history, and after more than 40 years of totalitarian oppression, the people of Central and Eastern Europe cast off the political chains that have bound them since the end of the Second World War, and it's how, as nonviolent, democratic character, can appreciate that without taking into consideration the account of the Catholic Church and Leon, like its suffering pastor, John Paul II. The foremost is symbolic of him. One could hardly do better than to choose John Paul's funded Mass Czechoslovakia on Revolution, 1979. So Lonsky did not get it quite right with the phrase bravely facing sort of stranger. The attempt to assassinate St. John Paul not having been of the kind that required a brave response. Nevertheless, we should note that the assassination called forth a more distinctively Christian personal response. John Paul's visit to assassin Raymond Aliacha in his prison cell. But I need to mention also one of the most prominent of many calls who answered that call not to be afraid. One Valensa and the organization in which he was instrumental in organizing in 1980. What was that organization? Legally, it was an independent trade union, but it was not limited to the employees of any particular enterprise or the practitioners of any particular occupation. It was not exactly a political party either. Its membership ranging from Christian democratic to socialist. Though its objectives were in a broad sense political, perhaps it's best just to call it a mass social movement. Whatever it was, what emerged on the 31st of August 1980 as an organization was, like the church, outside of government control, but unlike the church, was one whose nature and proper end was secular. However, it was influenced by Christian Catholic social doctrine and so on. And so this is a secular organization, not your religious one. Solidarność was aptly named. The workers at Gdańsk shipyard were not content with the resolution of their own workplace grievances. The problem they insisted was larger. The slogan that captured the spirit of the movement was, "Workers of all enterprises unite." The rural counterpart, Solidarność, was quickly established. Solidarność also affected until then largely unrealized solidarity between workers and intellectuals, between Catholic and secular intellectuals, and between Catholics and Jews. By the end of 1980, it had 10 million members. Solidarność should not have risen ex nihilo. One can see its roots in organizations formed in the mid-1970s. Nevertheless, it did not last long. On the 13th of December 1981, the government declared a state of war. They didn't technically have martial law, so they declared a state of war. Well, they got many figures say. Yes, people will feel unfamiliar, so they don't get to it. Anyway, so they declared a state of war, and the rest of Beaumont saw along with thousands of others. Solidarity was disestablished in 1982. This state of war ended in July 1983, but repression did not. October 1984, saw the murder of Solidarność chaplain, Blessed Yosef Stavushko, to the I'll return briefly in my third lecture. In the wake of more strikes in 1988 and the emergence of Mikhail Gorbachev as General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, the government, in the roundtable talks of February to April 1989, agreed to the re-legalization of Solidarność and partially free elections. I didn't say it didn't. But if you don't know the American film Hero, you just gotta go look at them and appreciate it. But note the change. The sheriff behind him is holding the gun. The reimagination of him is holding up ballot. It's on the ballots. In June 1989, Solidarność won one of the seats which they were allowed to contest. That, together with the defection of two communist allied parties from the communist coalition, allowed the appointment of Brzezinski as the first non-communist prime minister in Eastern Europe since the 1940s. Lawrence's accomplishments won him a Nobel Prize in 1938. But Alexei and Pilsudski, and for them in their boards, saw his great accomplishments followed by challenges that he was not able to overcome. The success in keeping the rich coalition that was Solidarność unified through the restoration of democratic governments, a success so great that Jacek Kuron said it should have earned him a second Nobel Peace Prize, was followed first by the perhaps inevitable fracturing of the organization and second by a less successful long-term presidency. Still, Poland's success of bringing communist rule to an end at home quickly spread abroad. November, December 1989 saw in quick succession following the Berlin Wall, Czechoslovakia's own revolution, and the overthrow of Nicolae Ceausescu in Romania. It spread back to Baltic states and Ukraine, where it led finally to the dissolution of the Soviet Union itself. Journalist Timothy Gordon-Ash wrote that there's an important sense in which the end of Yalta, the Christian of Europe, began in Poland. No country did more for the cause of liberty in Europe in the 1980s. So, we've discussed two of the figures of Rosen's picture, Sobieski and Pilsudski. The other two lived after he'd finished paying. He accomplished a Jeffrey Pinchkin, and we added those two more. On the 17th of November, I'll begin with a third, the poet Jan Kochanowski, one has devoted that 3 minutes talk to one aspect of Polish literature. So, thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Kemp. Very, very grateful. We're going to say a couple of more things, and we will have an opportunity for questions, but we're going to continue with the musical opportunity. I'm going to invite Brian Billion forward, and he's going to share a little bit about his second Chopin piece. And then we're going to end the recording and continue with some questions, make a couple of final announcements as well about the next sessions. But again, thank you so much, Brian, for your presence with us tonight, and also in the choir loft for the 9:30 Mass each Sunday. Thank you.
It's so right.
Thank you. I'll just say a few introductory words about the piece I'll play. I can't think of a more fitting piece It's titled Polonaise Fantasy. In light of what we've just heard, given its Polish nature, Polonaise, but also its sort of spiritual nature, fantasy. So it's a strange title of a piece, a combination of two different genres, of Polonaise being Polish national dance, and fantasy being something sort of evocative of and transcendental. And first I kind of want to show you just how that manifests itself. So I might move this mic actually.
So even in the opening first few measures of the piece, you see the dichotomy of the Polonaise, which has this traditional rhythm. So it's sort of a march dance, and then the fantasy. So I'll just play the first few measures of it where this dichotomy is clear in these Polonaise chords, and then this sort of fantasy figure. So you can kind of see how he's contemplating both things. Chopin was very patriotic for Poland, his homeland. He was incredibly patriotic and had a deep love for Polish culture, which is why he wrote so many mazurkas and Krakowiak and Kujawiak, polonaises, and such, Polish traditional dances. So it kind of is playing always between these two themes. A polonaise, this sort of dance, is something sort of ethereal. And the thing that strikes me about this piece is it's his last major composition. So he's already writing this thinking about the other world, so to speak. You know, he's very sick, and he wrote this in the last year of his life. And so he's kind of gazing beyond, I think. And unlike many of his major works that end in a minor key, kind of with sort of a certain angst or question, this piece decisively ends with sort of a fusion of both the Polonaise and the fantasy, where you have the Polonaise melody, but you no longer have the Polonaise rhythm. So you have aspects of both in this passage. I'll play the main theme, which is a Polonaise, and then I'll play the fantasy part that comes later in the piece. It's quite a narrative of a piece, and then when they come together, I'll just kind of demonstrate those. So that's the Polonaise, and then the fantasy. So you have these two sort of different themes representing two different things, and at the very end they come together in what I kind of see as some sort of salvific message or some sort of resurrection in the climactic triumphant end. So I think it's one of his most spiritual pieces, clearly, I think, profound in its message of personal hope. I think that he expresses through it in his in something that can save him outside of himself, which is manifested to in his conversion on his deathbed a few months later, where he kind of converted back to his faith of his childhood. So it's a beautiful piece, and so those two things kind of are two things to listen for and to kind of follow the narrative of the Polonaise and the fantasy.